Greetings, welcome back to Black Bear News, where we are discussing sustainability, deep adaptation, and compassionate degrowth in the face of abrupt climate change, or more simply put, a realistic discussion of where we're at and what we can do. What is deep adaptation? What does that even mean to you or to me? I don't know. I've just seen the phrase used, obviously, in a recent paper about climate change. But what does deep adaptation mean? Storing a bunch of food in a bunker? Does it mean moving to South America? Does it mean moving 8,000 feet up in the mountains? What does that mean? Does it mean just preparing yourself mentally, psychologically, for the wave of crises about to engulf us? What does it mean? I don't know. Y'all let me know if you can in the comments. I have no thoughts on what. I don't know how one would adapt to an extinction level event. I don't know how one would adapt to a massive rise in temperature. I don't know. We don't have the physical capabilities of adapting to something like that. I don't think. I think all we have is psychological adaptation. I think all we have is preparing ourselves mentally, possibly communicating the problem to other people. If there is someone out there with ideas about how to adapt to these changes that are coming our way, please let me know. I don't know what it is. Maybe moving up in the mountains is the thing to do. Maybe staking out some land somewhere way up in a mountain range would be a way to avoid it. I don't know. I'm unsure and unclear. I used to think a few years ago that I was going to move to a certain part of the U.S. and avoid it. Maybe I was going to move to the Northwest. Maybe I was going to move to the Great Lakes area. It looks like the northern latitudes are heating as fast, if not faster, than the southern latitudes. So there's, at least in the northern hemisphere, not much of an escape, because the tropics are going to heat up. And as the tropics heat up, the Arctic and the northern latitudes heat up at a faster pace, at a faster rate, not really allowing people to escape. So I thought actually that Tim Garrett's idea of moving up into the mountains was at least interesting at best. I haven't had a chance to really look into what that means in a realistic sense, as a place to put oneself. I don't know. Anyways, just thoughts. I'm going to roll some tape of some more dead and dying trees. If this isn't a sign of early stages or early stage biosphere collapse, I don't know what is. It's alarming. This is mostly, again, in where I live, in the hometown where I live. I haven't had a chance to really get some shots of the other places I was talking about, Griffith Park and Chavez Ravine. But what I'm going to show you is basically in this picture, in this footage, this used to be a canopy. This was my entire life that I've lived in the city, there was a canopy of trees over the street. And as you can see, the trees have parted, they've been cut back. And what's basically happening is the leaves on the top are all dying, falling off. So they're chopping off the dead looking branches off the top of the trees to make the trees look somewhat normal. I don't know where these trees are in the state of being alive or dead, but I'm assuming that they're on their way to being dead. And then I'm just going to show you some pictures of more dead trees, as interesting as that will be. So just going to dive into some things. I'm going to link a video with Kevin Anderson from Democracy Now!, talking about the UN report, talking about the problems with the UN report. I like Kevin Anderson's work a lot. I think we all agree he is one of the better voices on climate change. And he is also trying, at least, to put his money where his mouth is. So starting off with a story about Hurricane Michael. Hundreds found by rescuers after Hurricane Michael, but many still missing, death toll at 17. This is from, ironically, Fox News. No mention of climate change, I'm sure. And this is updated today. Rescuers have located hundreds of people who have been missing in the aftermath of Hurricane Michael, but many are still unaccounted for, according to a report. It was not immediately clear how many people were missing in Florida, but emergency vehicles said they had received thousands of calls asking about missing people. But with cell phone service out across a wide area, they found it impossible to know who among those unaccounted for were safe, but just unable to dial out for friends or family. The Miami Herald reported that thousands of people were informally reported missing to the Red Cross, local authorities, and the state. Matthew Marchetti, the co-founder of Crowdsource Rescue, later told Reuters that volunteers consisting of firefighters and off-duty officers found more than 520 people who had been reported missing. After Michael barreled into the Florida panhandle, it made its way to southwest Georgia and South Carolina, while also lashing North Carolina and Virginia. At least 17 people have been killed. Marchetti said he believed more people would be found on Saturday. We expect that number to go up dramatically today. Marchetti told Reuters, despite the rescues, the death toll was also expected to rise. We still haven't gotten into the hardest hit areas. FEMA chief Brock Long said, very few people live to tell what it's like to experience storm surge. And unfortunately, in this country, we seem to not learn the lesson. Seminole County Emergency Management Director Alan Harris said Florida was going to establish a mortuary location, but didn't see that as a critical need. If y'all have seen some of these pictures, are pretty crazy. I don't think we know enough. He said we've got to finish search and rescue. The other thing on top of that, a lot of people will get hurt afterwards. That's why we talk about make sure you know how to use a generator. Don't put it inside your house. Be careful with all the chainsaws. Don't touch down power lines, etc. So I'm going to link this below. Pretty amazing pictures from Mexico Beach and some other locations. Moving on. Oh, so very randomly, speaking of Mexico, I saw this. I'm going to link this video, and it's about a Mexican town where basically they kicked out the police, the politicians, loggers, corporations. The town basically took over their own operations, and they have armed guards with automatic weapons, like standing at the points of entry, like making sure none of these idiots get in. It's pretty darn interesting, and most likely impossible in the United States, something like this. But this is what I think of when I think of actually doing something to move possibly ourselves outside of the system, is that, you know, we need to somehow establish communities where we are controlling our own grid, controlling our goods and services, or lack thereof, and keeping the forces that want to exert their control over us out. And obviously, there have been a few experiments of this kind in the United States. Generally, they get squashed militarily or by police forces. It doesn't mean that it's not something worth trying. If you don't succeed, etc., ad infinitum, ad nauseum. This is from yesterday, 2 days ago. Major heat wave for Northern Europe and the Arctic this weekend. Models agree. Northern Europe and the Arctic are in for a major heat wave this weekend. Temperatures are expected to be up to 10 to 15 C above the long-term average for this period. The strong ridge and warm air advection ahead of the low-pressure area over the Atlantic, including the upcoming cyclone Callum, will result in temperatures well above the long-term average for this period. Temperatures are expected to soar 10 to 15 C above the 1981 to 2010 average across large parts of Northern Europe, as well as over northern parts of Central Europe. Additional warming is expected across fjords in Western Norway, as southeasterly winds produce significant foehn effects. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Foehn, F-O-E-H-N. I have no idea. So there's some images here of the heat wave, and just looking insanely hot. I mean, 10 C above a normal average is 10 to 15 C above a normal average is pretty incredible. Moving on. This is called climate change. And, wait for it, collective salvation. This is from Common Dreams. This is from Thursday, October 11th, by Robert Kohler. In the wake of the Brett Kavanaugh confirmation, as white male privilege reclaims its desperate grip on our future, the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report comes out, informing us that we haven't got much future left in which to implement serious change. Meanwhile, the midterm elections percolate. Our quasi-democracy, rife as it is with voter suppression and mainstream media determination to trivialize the issues at stake, remains nonetheless the country's primary means of manifesting public values. Okay. Inconvenient as it is to the powerful, this thing called voting is how collective humanity expresses its will. And I believe this will, to paraphrase Martin Luther King, bends towards sanity. I hope so. This is about more than numbers and individual interests. As the UN report is trying to tell us, this is about evolution. We have to become a civilization that is not at perpetual war with the planet that sustains it. As Avi Lewis writes, the only thing that can save us now is the total transformation of our political and economic system. Ding, ding, ding. The UN report warns, in essence, that humanity has only a dozen years to mitigate global warming and limit the scope of global catastrophe, as Amy Goodman says on Democracy Now! Otherwise, millions will be imperiled by increasing droughts, floods, fires, and poverty. The sweeping report urges immediate and unprecedented changes to global policy in order to keep global warming at a maximum of 1.5 degrees Celsius. The primary urgency here is to stop emitting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere and or polluting. I guess that's the primary urgency, but I imagine There's quite a few others linked to that. How is change at this level possible? I truly do not know. But I refuse to succumb to cynicism. I refuse, as I have put it in the past, to remain trapped in the comfort zone of helplessness. Our political system may seem to be caught up in the trivial interests of the powerful and manipulation of the fears and prejudices of everyone else, but deep values are managing to emerge nonetheless. Here's one way to start doing that on a personal level, on a very small level, but I think on a powerful level. You can start in your own home to limit your consumption, limit your pollution, limit your carbon footprint. There are many, many ways to do this. There are many people on this channel who have done this and who are currently doing it, and who can currently tell you about how they're doing it. Imagine if we took over, as in the case of the Mexican city, if we took over whole city blocks and turned them into like fossil fuel no-go zones, right? If you had whole city blocks powered by solar power or some kind of renewable energy source, and people were living very, very low carbon lifestyles, meaning that they were not think the Amish, not using electricity, not using appliances, not using all kinds of the stuff. Obviously we need communication, possibly finding ways around the use of fossil fuels to power the communication. There are ways that people are doing this. If we took over whole city blocks and turned them into low energy, low carbon footprint kind of areas, and demanded that this is what, we could show that it's possible, and people could see what this is like, and people could, do this all over the country, and this could spread and multiply, and et cetera, et cetera. But first you got to get people off the teat of wanting and needing everything that they want and need. The transition we have to make is described with clarity and succinctness. I think he's obviously paraphrasing this video that I'm going to link. Succinctness by Kevin Anderson, a professor in climate change leadership in the Department of Earth Science at Sweden's Uppsala University. Noting that about 70% of global emissions of carbon dioxide come from about 20% of the world's population, that is to say from those who live in relative wealth and comfort. He hones in his focus on what must change. We have to move the productive capacity of our society from building second homes for professors or private jets or private yachts or large four-wheel drive cars, moving from that to building public transport, electrification, improved homes for everyone. So it's a shift of that productive capacity, the resource and the labor from the luxury for the 20% to the essential low carbon infrastructure for all of us, describing a profound social shift. Only partially, because it seems to curb the rights of the relatively wealthy to live the way they want, from zooming across country in their gas-guzzling SUVs to taking private jet to St. Bartholomew. The essence of the change he is describing isn't simply a parental or autocratic no-no to those with money. It's a consciousness shift from individual to collective decision-making in how we use the planet's resource. It does have to be a consciousness shift, and it has to be a consciousness shift on a level that does not allow those people to do it anyways, even if they haven't shifted their own consciousness. We're going to have to shift it for them. By golly. The paradox here is that those who must give up their rights, quote unquote, their rights to create climate change, are those with money and power to declare, no way. No ruling authority is going to suddenly emerge from the great beyond and outlaw private jets or Mar-a-Lago or, my God, defund the Department of Defense. Facing up to climate change requires human cooperation at an unprecedented level. Avi Lewis puts it this way: transforming our economy and society on the scale this crisis requires is the most powerful opportunity we've ever had to build a more caring, livable planet. Yes. Could such an opportunity ever be seized? Perhaps a failure to do so means the end of humanity. The rich have to see beyond their own comfort and profit. The politically powerful have to see beyond war, and we have about 12 years to make the shift. So, yeah, the first part would be collapsing the economy on purpose. You know, a very essential realization is that the economy cannot continue on the path that it's continuing. So we have to, it's up to the corporations, the business leaders to let go of their profits and the reins of, you know, hey, you guys have billions of dollars. You have lots of resources at your disposal. Why not be truly altruistic, and why not be truly, what's the word I'm looking for? Philanthropic, mouth not working. If you are truly caring for humanity and the future of the planet, you could take all of your resources, stop producing all the things you have to produce and sell, and shift on a dime. You know, we need really like one major corporation to do this. We need one business leader to do this, to stop trying to sell people rides into space and say, like, guess what? We need one actor, you know, a la Leonardo DiCaprio, to say, like, guess what? This is, you know, I'm so concerned about this that I'm going to take all my wealth and all my power and all my commitment to this problem and be an example to others and urge others to do the same. Perhaps when it is too late, everybody will be like, yeah, it's a good idea. It sounds real nice. You know what I'm saying? So this is from Australia. I think Henry linked this to me. This is from Weather Zone in Australia. You can't keep arguing this is just a cycle. Farmers struggling to manage impacts of climate change. Peter Mailer is a third-generation farmer, but the effects of climate change continue on their current path. He doesn't expect anyone will be farming his 6,000-acre property near Goondiwindi in the future. You can't keep arguing this is just a cycle, he told 730. Yes, there are dry periods, and yes, there are wetter periods. Yes, there are warm periods. Yes, there are cool periods. But we have shifted the averages. The baselines have moved to the point where we are now unable to manage the impacts of those extreme events in that set. And with that, Mr. Mailer is not sure what he will do. We're running out of tricks. Agriculture is a gamble, and every time temperatures rise and impacts of climate change rolls down, the odds keep moving in favor of the house. My bet is that high temperatures are here to stay. Good bet. And that is a serious threat to how we farm and how we manage that lack of rainfall. Farmers interested in science and fact and evidence. Farmers see the effects of climate change firsthand. And many, like Mr. Mailer, are now convinced the predictions are correct. Even the peak body, the National Farmers Federation, now says it's a matter of whether climate change is real, but what to do about it. Farmers look at science. NFF President Fiona Simpson told 730, we are very interested in science and fact and evidence. And we think now there is plenty of evidence on the table that climate change is a factor that we're going to have to deal with here in Australia. So let's make sure that we can incorporate it into our policies in a way that we can continue to be productive and profitable, where we can continue to be sustainable. Ms. Simpson runs a cattle station near Tamworth in NSW, North Southwest. We've been here for 90 years, and if we look back over, or is that New South Wales? Sorry. Is that what NSW stands for? Hold, please. In New South Wales. we've been here for 90 years, and if we look back over the 90 years, we've seen a series of droughts come and go, she said. Right now, I think farmers certainly are looking at the climate change and work that's been done on climate change and the heating of the earth, and they're thinking about how that will affect them on farms. Mr. Mailer believes that effect will be dramatic. Australia is probably more exposed to the effects of climate change than a lot of other places, he said. We're all exposed. We already operate in some of the most volatile conditions in the world, and climate change means those conditions are going to be more volatile and more extreme. He rejects the argument that Australia's emissions are too small to make a global difference. As an affluent first world nation, we have an obligation to show leadership in this space. Yes, you do. If we don't show leadership and start to be proactive, then who will? The answer is nobody. It's pretty simple. Success in spite of the politicians. Well, we need to eject the politicians. Ejection. As from a quick-moving airplane. Eject. I'm going to link that below. Moving on to something. Last bit of something I'm going to read a part of. This is from Motherboard. Eco-socialists believe the only way to stop climate change is to abandon capitalism. This week's devastating IPCC report has brought the impending facts of climate change and just how far we are from meeting our goals to stop them into crisp focus. We Earthlings have had to swallow some hard truths lately. The impending impacts of climate change and just how far we are from meeting our goals to stop them have been brought into crisp focus not only by major intergovernmental reports, but also the slew of dramatic weather events around the globe. It can be easy to feel hopeless, like there's nothing we can do to stop our species from obliterating the planet as we know it in less than a generation. But there's one sect of people who think they have the answer, and if everyone just get on board, could easily curb the effects of climate change. It's called eco-socialism, and it's exactly as radical as it sounds. Eco-socialism combines the ideas of ecology and socialism, meaning that you have a society without class divisions that lives in some kind of harmony or balance with nature. Victor Wallace, author of the Red-Green Revolution, the Politics and Technology of Eco-Socialism, told me in a phone interview, you can't make the decisions necessary for the health of the environment on the basis of profit calculations. Ding. Eco-socialism first began to spread in the 1980s along with environmentalism. Though some scholars argue that the roots of this movement trace back to Karl Marx's theories, the concept is basically that environmental protection is incompatible with capitalism. Ding, ding. And the best, or some would argue only way to fight climate change is to move towards a socialist society. Capitalism, ding, ding, ding. Capitalism is always going to be driven towards producing and consuming more and more, which is a big part of how we got into this pickle to begin with. Though proponents of the movement have trouble detangling the two ideologies, the overlap may not be immediately apparent to everyone. After all, there are profits to be made from the fight against climate change. Think of renewable energy or electric cars. These industries don't exist out of some corporate altruism. They exist because they're profitable, and they are growing rapidly. In 2017, more than 500,000 new jobs in renewable energy were created around the world, bringing the total number of people employed in the sector to 10 million. And $335 billion of new investments were made in the industry. But eco-socialists argue even if some parts of capitalism can advance an environmental agenda, the rest of the market will still be working against it and will never get where we need to be. Unless you do away with capitalism, you'll still have the other companies that are much more influential and bigger in scale, like oil companies. Wallace said there's ultimately a clash in the wider scheme of things, even if you have one sector of a capitalist market that responds to people's concerns about their environment. The other aspect of socialism that Wallace says meshes well with environmentalism is leveling the playing field. You may not like that your job at a coal mine contributes to climate change, but you still need to feed your family and pay your bills. If we could flatten out class structures so that was no longer a concern, more people would be able to participate in the changes we need to make. What does an eco-socialist society even look like? Do we all live in vertical farms together, sharing crops and riding bicycles to power our light bulbs? Eric Holthaus, a meteorologist, reporter, and eco-socialist, told me it doesn't have to be that dramatic of a shift. It's not going to require everyone giving up all their possessions and living on a farm for the rest of their lives, Holthaus said in a phone interview. Holthaus argues that we have the technology to rapidly shift to a world that runs on carbon-free energy, but that won't happen in a current structure because it doesn't benefit those already at the top. He pointed to the fact that the studies have shown just 100 companies are responsible for 71% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. If we created a government willing to strictly regulate these companies, it would make a drastic impact and open the door to a clean energy future. This all sounds peachy, but it also sounds impossible, especially under the current climate change denying administration in the US. It doesn't seem likely that we could make such a massive global shift in enough time to slow down this runaway train of destruction. While Wallace largely agreed, quipping that even though it's highly unlikely, it's our only option, Holthaus was a little more optimistic. Think of 30 years ago, 1988 was a very different world. He said, the example I always go back to is gay marriage. At one point, it felt impossible. It felt like an issue we would never change, but with a lot of people working hard behind the scenes and very publicly for decades, the political world switched within just a few years. Holthaus thinks that we could see similar switches with climate change as more people become aware of the dire straits we're all in and decide, we'd like to stay on this planet for a while. And it's not just a fringe movement. The U.S. Green Party has embraced eco-socialism as a core tenet of its platform since 2016. Democratic socialism has seen a surge in popularity this year, including the election of Democratic Socialist Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who ousted a 10-term incumbent for a congressional seat in New York this summer. The Democratic Socialists of America organization has also adopted the eco-socialism philosophy and has an eco-socialism working group. It reaches beyond the US as well. In the UK, Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn has been an outspoken advocate of eco-socialist approach to climate change. Regardless of how tightly you subscribe to the notion of eco-socialism, both Holthaus and Wallace recommended getting out and getting active. Find like-minded individuals, groups, and political parties, get organized. Start living in a way that will make this kind of transition easier. Though it may not be a panacea, at this stage in the game, I, for one, am happy to explore any idea that people believe will bring us back from the brink. I think it's possible to have a world that we want and the world we need to have, Holthaus said. I want to believe that that's true. And we also need more a reversal of the information that we've been getting from the mainstream media, which is that it's not that big of a deal, that it's not, obviously they're starting to cover climate change, and they're starting to cover climate change as a serious problem, but the media as it is run as fully funded by making sure that we keep on producing and buying junk and selling each other junk. And that has to change. And they're also allowing for the denialist message to continue to be promulgated. And that is a big, big problem. And even alternative news has a huge problem with the denialism. There's a large body of maybe right-leaning alternative sites, especially a lot of the ones that cover Q, which are just, they're just denying every single day, just out of hand, that anything is going on, that, climate change is real, and that it's all some kind of government conspiracy, blah, 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 blah. And obviously we can't make any changes until that, that line is broken, until that line of communication is broken or turned around or disavowed. So that's why there's channels like this. So hopefully there will be more channels. I see others starting their own channels and starting to speak about this, and I'm highly encouraged by that. And I encourage you, if you want to get the word out about this information, you can do it. If you have the technology, we all have the technology at this point in the game to turn on a camera and start speaking our minds about this, start trying to encourage others to do the same. It is a absolutely grassroots effort at this point to get the word out about how serious this problem is, because as much as the scientists are trying to tell us this, everything in our culture runs against what the scientists are trying to say to us. So we really need to turn around the programming and turn around the brainwashing and turn around the whole culture of capitalism is good and, you know, yay, and we're going forward and everything's lovely. That's absolutely a big old lie that needs to be popped. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so at the links below. Until next time, peace.